The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
I don't know how she did it, but my mom knew everything. She knew when I was down the street arguing with my sister Lulu about whose turn it was to walk the new dog or ride the new bike. And when I listen to the Obama White House, I give her even more credit. No one in this administration knows anything. Hello and welcome to Justice. I'm Judge Jeanine Pirro. Thanks for being with us tonight. Now, the president didn't know that the inspector general was investigating his IRS for targeting political enemies. The president didn't know anything about his Justice Department seizure of Associated Press phone records. The Attorney General didn't know anything about his department's subpoena of AP records. But then again, Holder's the one who didn't know anything about Fast and Furious either. And of course, Hillary didn't know anything about the request for help in Benghazi. And Joe Biden, well, he just doesn't know anything about anything. So who's running the joint? I'm convinced my mom could do a better job. This week on full display, the White House reeling after revelations that the IRS targeted political enemies and the Justice Department engaged in the wholesale seizing of press phone records. So what to do?
We are out there trying to hunt down the folks who carried this out, and we're trying to make sure that we fix the system so that it doesn't happen again.
Weren't you going to do that with Benghazi? Not only did you not get the facts there, the truth is that you lied about the facts, didn't you? The truth is you didn't even send your investigators there for 3 weeks, giving the terrorists, the press, and anyone else who wanted the chance to rummage through classified documents that Ambassador Chris Stevens didn't even have a golden hour to destroy because your consulate didn't meet minimum security standards. But to the IRS, you really want to hunt down the folks that carried this out? I'll tell you where to look. You start with the IRS agents at the Cincinnati office, the guys you first tried to put all the blame on. Then you put them in the grand jury, and you ask them under oath which supervisors directed them to withhold tax-exempt status and investigate anyone who might criticize your administration. Now, you feds know how to do that. You do it all the time. And by the way, the system doesn't need to be fixed. Your administration needs to be fixed. So if you want the truth, tell your director of the IRS exempt division, the learned Lois Lerner, the one who says she's not good at math, not to lie to Congress, which she did when she said that her screening process was unbiased, when in truth, 2 years ago, she knew her agents were flagging all cases of anyone who might criticize your administration. But of course, Mr. President, you'll get to the bottom of this.
I think we're going to be able to figure out exactly what happened, who was involved, what went wrong, and we're going to be able to implement steps to fix it. And we began that process yesterday by asking and accepting the resignation of the acting director there.
So now you tell the acting director of the IRS, Stephen Miller, that he has to go. With all due respect, Mr. President, mindless Miller wasn't even there when all this happened. And he was leaving in a couple of weeks anyway. You think we're stupid? So you fire the acting commissioner, who wasn't even there when the wrongdoing occurred. But you give Sarah Ingram, the tax-exempt commissioner who was there, implementing this abuse of power, a plum assignment in charge of the tax agency that oversees the Obamacare office. And you want her to do what? You want her to oversee my health care? You want my health and my life in her hands? You who look at me through political filters? You who want to know what books I read, what candidates I support, and whether I might someday run for office? You and your IRS and Obamacare henchmen, or in the case of Benghazi, a lack thereof. you and your IRS Obamacare henchmen decide if I get that mastectomy or if I get the prosthesis for that limb that got blown off because you can't listen to another country that goes out of its way to give us a tip about the Boston bomber, not once, but twice, about 2 terrorist dirtbags who you're housing, educating, and funding, who want to kill us? And who get to do it because your FBI and your ICE agents can't for the life of them figure out how to identify and stop someone from coming back into our country after spending 6 months in the country from which they supposedly sought political refuge. But, oh, I forgot.
What difference at this point does it make?
Well, maybe I'm just spending too much time on Benghazi. But then you engage in a massive, unprecedented intrusion of phone records of journalists, editors' offices, home phones, cell phones. This is serious stuff, Mr. President. We are not North Korea. This is not Iran. A little primer here. If law enforcement wants press records, you notify the press, you negotiate with the press, and you give them a chance to challenge in court, unless there's a substantial threat to the investigation. Now, you were in negotiations with the AP. They agreed to embargo or hold back your story. You know, there are always 2 reasons for things: the given reason and the real reason. Mr. President, you were in the middle of a very tight presidential race, and you planned a press conference to beat that drum about how you dashed yet another terrorist plot. And when the very people you asked to embargo the story heard you were about to do the same story, they scooped you first, and they did it first. Time to maybe get even and target the press?
U.S. national security is dependent on those folks being able to operate with confidence that folks back home have their backs. So they're not just left out there high and dry. And I don't think the American people would expect me as Commander-in-Chief not to be concerned about information that might compromise their missions or might get them killed.
Gee, too bad you didn't use that same reasoning in Benghazi when you had a chance but still left American soldiers high and dry. How can you say that you didn't notify anyone because it was a threat to national security when you were about to disclose the very same information? Might you have done it in a more self-serving way? And now your AG, in over his head holder, is the one who personally has to sign off on this kind of subpoena. But he says he knows nothing about it because he recused himself. Really? Where's the recusal letter? Where's the recusal memo? Where's the phone call? Okay, so we know you've already lied about that one stylistic change on Benghazi. And by the way, it was nice of you to do an email dump on a Friday afternoon in the midst of 2 other burgeoning scandals. And I've read those emails. Why were they classified in the first place? There's nothing confidential in them. Unless, of course, confidential to you means it makes you look bad. And even Petraeus, who may be a philanderer, was honest enough to say, frankly, I just assume not use this. Translation, not lie. Interesting how word of his affair comes to light right after that. Sounds like a classic Obama-Chicago squeeze plan. Excuse my pun. But maybe I'm spending too much time on Benghazi. According to righteous Harry Reid, the president was right to call Benghazi a sideshow.
They're hyperventilating about Benghazi. President Obama was absolutely right to call this a sideshow. This is about smear politics and nothing else.
Hyperventilating? I'll tell you what, Mr. Reid, and no due respect intended here. There were only 2 people hyperventilating in Benghazi. They're the ones painted by al-Qaeda-linked lasers. 2 men on a roof who disobeyed your order to stand down, waited hours for help that never came because you wouldn't give the cross-border authority order. And instead, you fired up Air Force One for your Las Vegas fundraiser and went to bed. So don't give me your holier-than-thou rhetoric and your arrogant, condescending hogwash that you're going to get rid of all the wrongdoers or throw us a few crumbs like grainy pictures of terrorists 8 months after the Benghazi attack, or give me, I'm going to fix it, riff. And do us all a favor, explain a few things. Why is it that you apologize to Muslims and you lie to Americans? Why is it that you use the IRS to silence political dissent and the DOJ to threaten the press? Why is it that you mobilize the IRS to go after political enemies, but you can't mobilize troops to save American lives in Benghazi? Greg Hicks said it best. The man who fought to get help for Americans, who put his own life on the line in Benghazi, the one that you demoted to a desk job.
I was stunned. My jaw dropped. And I was embarrassed.
You can't continue to embarrass us anymore. The American people want the truth. The American people can handle the truth. And we don't need your Jack Nicholson moment.
You want answers?
I think I'm entitled.
You want answers?
I want the truth!
You can't handle the truth.
We have the right to know it. We have the right to expect it. In fact, we have the right to demand it. I'm still convinced my mom could do a better job.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.